Hey everyone, in this tutorial we're going to take a look at building an API with Golang. So here's the catch though, we're actually going to be using mock data as part of our API. We're not going to include a database in this particular example. Instead we're going to focus more on the use of URL routes and building our structs and anything necessary to make a RESTful API possible. So that includes no database, no front end layer, but we will still be able to test it and make sure that it's working correctly. So that way when you look at one of my future videos, you can see how to include a database and really bring this application to life. So we do need Golang installed on our computer. It is already installed on mine. So let's start by going to the Go path. So we're going to start by creating a new project. So we're going to say make directory -p, and this is all in our terminal. We're going to say Go path, which should be set, source. In this case, the source of mine is github.com/nraboy. You'll set it to whatever yours is. And then we're going to create a project called My Project. And let's go ahead and navigate into that project now. All right, so I did navigate into the project. This particular project will require an outside dependency to make the URL routing easier. I'm not saying that it's going to make it possible. I'm going to say it'll make it easier. The stuff that ships with Go out of the box isn't particularly helpful especially for beginners. So instead, we're going to use a library called mux. So if you want to get it, you would do the following. You would say go get github.com/gorilla/mux. And this would install it to your Go path. So with that created, what we want to do is we want to first create a new Go file. It doesn't really matter what you call it. Ours, however, will be called, or at least mine, will be main.go. With the project created and the dependencies downloaded and the file created, let's go ahead and open it in an editor rather than using the terminal. I'm going to be using Atom by GitHub. You can use whatever you want though. So I'm going to say Atom dot, and this will open the project. At which point now I can open this Go file and start developing. Now, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create our package. We're going to name our package called main. And typically what you would do now is you would include the imports for all of our dependencies that we've downloaded. I'm not going to do that because my editor actually has a lot of plugins installed, so that way it'll actually remove unnecessary or unused imports and add them automatically. So I won't bother with doing them manually. If for some reason you don't have these same packages in your IDE, go ahead and create them manually along the way. I'll scroll up and show you exactly what has been created and when it has been created, so that way you're not left in the dark. So the first thing that we typically do in an application is we create our main function. So let's go ahead and do that now. And since we will be using this mux router, we need to go ahead and set it up. So we're going to say router equals mux.newRouter. And I'm going to hit save. And you can see my editor already it did that import for that mux router. So you can just go ahead and replicate what mine does along the way. And it's erroring out because we're not using it yet. The next thing we want to do is we want to spin up our server, our Golang server. And you'll notice we haven't created any routes yet. That's fine. We'll get there. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and spin up our server. So we're going to say log.fatal http.listen and serve. We're going to assign it a particular port that we want to serve it on. In this case, I'm just going to use 12345. And then we're going to pass in that router and hit save. So you can see more imports were added and the errors have gone away now. So before we start actually developing each and every endpoint for this application, let's go ahead and lay the foundation for them. So let's, for example, do the following. We're going to say function get person endpoint. So this particular endpoint will be responsible for getting a particular person, one person. For parameters, it includes W, which is the HTTP response writer. We have request, which is the HTTP.request. And to save us some typing, I'm actually going to copy and paste this a few times. So the second one, instead of get person, what we'll have is get people. And then for the next one, instead of get person or get people, we'll actually call it create person. And then finally, we have one more. This will be called delete person. And we won't worry about updating in this particular example. But in future examples, you'll see exactly how to do that. So I do have the foundation laid. So if we jump back into our main function, we can start syncing up those routes. So for example, we can say router dot handle function. We need to pass it our route. So in this case, it's going to be people. And that's going to be linked up with get people endpoint. And that's going to be of type get. So it's going to be a get request. And it says that I have a mistake somewhere. So let me just look at it real quick. Should be methods, sorry. So that's method, methods plural. And that will get all people. We're gonna replicate this process a few more times. So the next one will be people again, but there'll be a parameter. We're gonna pass in an ID parameter. And this will allow us to get one particular person. And it'll be a get endpoint as well because we're fetching data. The next one will be, of course, /people, but we're going to be able to define our ID. So typically you would do this in a put request, but you know what? It works fine for a post for a create as well. So this will be create person endpoint. This will be a post request. And then finally we have delete, which will also accept an ID. This will be delete person endpoint. And it'll be of type delete. Perfect. So much of the foundation is laid right now. Now, like I said, this will be using mock data. So we probably want to define that mock data right now before we actually start developing our endpoint logic. So in order to create our mock data, we do first need to create some structures. So some Golang structures. This, of course, as you can probably guess, uses people type data, so like names and address type stuff. So let's go ahead and give it a shot. So we're going to say type person struct, and this struct will have various information like ID, which will be a string. We're going to map it to JSON data. Because the JSON data is what we're going to be returning back to the user. So for example, JSON, and this particular field will be mapped to ID lowercase, and it'll omit if empty. So it will exclude it if it's empty. Then we have first name, which will also be a string. And the JSON mapping for this will be first name, all lowercase, omit empty. Likewise with last name, and now what we're actually going to do now is we're going to create another struct which will represent address information, and we're also going to include it in this person struct. So for example, we're going to have type address. It's going to be a struct. It's going to have city information. It's going to be of string. It's going to be JSON, city, omit empty. And you don't have to omit empty if you don't want, but I don't like having fields in that have empty strings. Let's go ahead and say state, which will also be a string. And now we need to bring it together. So back inside of our person struct, what we're going to do is we're going to say address. It's going to be of type address. And that's going to be linked up as JSON. and it's going to be address omit empty. All right. Now we can actually start populating this. But before we do, let's go ahead and create a global variable that represents person, so that way it can be used in every single one of our functions. We're going to say var people, and this is going to be a slice of people. Actually, it's not people, it's person. All right. So going back into the main, because this is where we're going to initialize our mock data, we're going to define some sample set data here. We're going to say people equals append people person, and we're going to say ID 1. Let's go ahead and say first name, Nick, last name, Raboy. And this is where things could get a little weird. We're going to say address. It's going to be ampersand, address, city. It's going to be Dublin. State. It's going to be California. So that's one entry for people. The next one we're going to do, because we're going to add another one, I'm just going to copy this so that way it saves us some time. And we're going to add another record. This time, this record will not have address information. So we're going to lose the address information. And this time it's going to be my wife, which is Maria Raboy. And I'm going to save it. So we now have 2 sample set data as part of our application. So the next thing, let's go ahead and start by creating an endpoint function for getting all people in the database, since this will be by far the easiest. But again, we're not using a database. When I say database, I'm referring to this sample set data that we created. Databases will be in another tutorial. Let's go ahead and say JSON dot new encoder w dot encode people, and save it. So you can see up until now it's added a bunch of imports at the top. I believe this is all of the imports that it'll add for the rest of the tutorial. But for this one get people endpoint, all we're doing is we're taking this struct, this slice of people, this slice of person, and it'll actually encode it to JSON and return it to the user. So let's go ahead and test this out. Let's test out this theory. So opening up the terminal, let's go ahead and run the following. Go build. So now it built my project called my project. I'm going to say I'm going to run it. So it is now running. So there's multiple ways that you can test this. You can use curl, you can use something else. I'm going to use a free tool called Postman. It's a Chrome extension. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit that endpoint localhost 12345 people. And it's a GET request. And let's see what happens. So I just ran it, and it got the data exactly how we expected it. So it returned an array, one record being my record, and it had address information, mapped exactly how we wanted it according to our JSON mapping, as well as my wife, who did not have an address added. So going back into the project, we're going to continue and build the rest of these endpoints. So for example, let's go ahead and get one particular person. Now, you'll notice that this is the logic here is just a bunch of loops, but we'll get to that in a second. So let's go ahead and say params colon equals mux.vars request. So what we're doing here is we want to get the URL parameters that were passed into this endpoint, so that ID parameter. So to do that, let's go ahead and say for underscore comma item equals range of people. So we're just looping. We're saying if item.id equals params ID. So ID being the exact parameter that we set down inside of our handle function. If you name it something else, you'll have to rename it in both places. So we check it here. If it is a match, we're going to say JSON dot new encoder w dot encode item, and then we're going to return out of it. Otherwise, what we're going to say is we're going to say JSON dot new encoder w dot encode, and we're actually going to return in this scenario an empty person structure. So what it will look like is if the ID doesn't exist, it'll return just an empty object, and we're going to save it. So what we can do is we could actually test that out now. So I'm going to stop this running project. This time along, I'm going to say go build ampersand ampersand, and I'm going to immediately run it afterwards. Save us some time. So it is running. Going back into my Postman, I know that one of the IDs is actually, let's say 2, and I'm going to send it. Oh, so that wasn't accurate. So let's go ahead and check it out again. Do I have an ID of 2? Nope. I did the mistake of naming them both 1. So that shouldn't happen when you're using an actual database, hopefully. Let's go ahead and change it. Be 1 and 2 for IDs. Going back to the terminal, let's go ahead and restart it. And let's try to run it again with 2. So as you can see, it returned one record this time, and previously it returned an empty object, exactly how it should, because that ID was not found. So now let's proceed to going on and creating data. So going back into our code, we're going to go to the create person endpoint. So inside of this endpoint, what we're going to do is we're going to say params equals mux.vars request. We're going to say var person. It's going to be of type person. And we're actually going to take the JSON data from the post body, and we're going to marshal it into this structure, this variable. Equals JSON dot new decoder request body dot decode, and the value that we're decoding into is ampersand person. So with that data there, what we can do now is we can say person.id equals params ID, because remember, we're passing in a custom-made ID. And now what we want to do is we want to say people equals append people person. So we're adding this newly created person to this slice, at which point now we're going to return it. JSON.new decoder. Oh, it should be new encoder. W.encode people. And save it. Now before we go ahead and test the create endpoint, while we're at it, let's go ahead and create our delete endpoint. So it should be rather simple. Nothing too out of the ordinary from what we've already seen. Params equals mux.vars request, and then we're going to say for index item equals range of people. And at this point, we're actually going to loop through this people slice, and we're going to compare whether or not the ID matches the ID that was passed, and if so, we're going to delete it based on the index. So let's go ahead and give it a shot. We're going to say if item.id equals params ID, then people equals append people, and this is where the delete happens, index. So we added the colon there because we're adding everything after here, or everything before and everything after. People index plus 1 colon, and then dot dot dot. and this will be how our delete happens, and we're going to break out of it after it happens. At which point at the end, we're going to return our encoded new people slice. So json.newEncoder w.encode people. All right, so let's give it a shot. See if all of these endpoints work out all right now. So we're going to reboot our application in our terminal. We're going to open up Postman. We can run this request, make sure that it still happens. Yes, it still happens. Let's go ahead and say 3. We'll create a new ID here. We're going to do a post request. We're going to go into the body. Let's go ahead and just say, let's just name it like that for now, and save it. So it added it to the list. So let's see if I can now do a get request again for all of these people. I did. So of course there's 3 records in here. I chose not to add an address to the final one. I could have if I wanted to. I chose not to. Now let's say I want to delete number 2. I'm going to say send. It looks like this person my wife was removed. So I'll do another get request. I'll get all data, send, and it does reflect accurately. So the delete worked, the create worked. We were able to get by ID. We were able to get all. We were able to do all of this in a very simple RESTful API that we created using the Go programming language. And of course, we use sample data. We did not use a database in this particular example, but we will in the future.